I'm Henry, 28 years old, and I never thought my own parents would betray me like this. For years, I worked multiple jobs while studying engineering, believing my college fund would eventually help clear my crushing student debt. Then I discovered the truth. They'd emptied it completely to fund my sister Elaine's jewelry business, the same one they always called more promising than my career. I cut them off completely. Weeks later, Mom called, "Send money for your sister's rent." Before I tell you what I answered, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever had to stand up to family who took you for granted. Growing up in Westlake, a middle-class suburb outside Cleveland, Ohio, seemed perfectly normal at first. Our two-story colonial with the faded blue shutters wasn't fancy, but it was home. My dad, Michael, worked as a sales manager at an office supply company, while my mom, Caroline, taught third grade at the local elementary school. My sister Elaine came along when I was 3, completing our seemingly perfect American family. The first time I noticed something was different was on my 7th birthday. I'd been hoping for a set of building blocks I'd pointed out for months. Instead, I got a practical backpack for school and some clothes. Mom smiled apologetically and said, "We need to be practical with you, Henry. You understand." I nodded, not wanting to seem ungrateful. 2 months later, for Elaine's 4th birthday, they transformed our backyard into an enchanted garden, complete with a rented bounce house and a professional face painter. When I mentioned the difference, Dad ruffled my hair and said, "Your sister just gets so excited about these things. You were always more serious." This pattern continued through elementary school. My straight A's were met with quick nods and comments like, "That's what we expect from you, Henry." When Elaine brought home a B+ in art, they hung it on the refrigerator for months and took her out for ice cream to celebrate her artistic breakthrough. I started to understand my role in the family, the reliable one, the one who shouldn't need much attention. Despite this, my passion for engineering blossomed early. At 9, I dismantled and reassembled our broken toaster, beaming with pride when it worked again. Dad just frowned at the mess I'd made on the kitchen table. By 11, I was building complex structures with whatever materials I could find. Cardboard popsicle sticks, old electronics parts. My 6th grade science project, a working model of a hydraulic bridge, won first prize at the district science fair. My parents attended but left early because Elaine had a dance recital the same afternoon. Mrs. Donovan, my 7th grade science teacher, was the first adult who seemed truly impressed by my abilities. After class one day, she showed me a magazine about engineering innovations and said, "You have a gift, Henry. I can see you designing incredible things someday." Her words stayed with me, becoming a North Star when family recognition was scarce. When I turned 12, during a rare moment of parental focus, Dad mentioned something that would shape my future expectations. "We've started a college fund for you, Henry. If you keep those grades up, you'll have a good head start for engineering school." Mom nodded in agreement, adding, "Education is important. We're putting away a little each month." This promise became fundamental to my understanding of their love. They might not show it emotionally, but they were planning for my future. Throughout my teenage years, they regularly referenced this fund. "Can't afford those concert tickets, Henry. We're putting that money toward your education." Or, "That summer camp would be nice, but we're focused on your college fund." I accepted these sacrifices, grateful they were investing in my future, even if they were frugal with praise. Meanwhile, Elaine cycled through expensive hobbies with alarming frequency, each one hailed as the discovery of her true calling. When she was 13, photography became her passion. Mom and Dad didn't hesitate to purchase a $2,000 camera setup, along with editing software and printing equipment. 6 months later, the camera collected dust as Elaine discovered painting. Our garage transformed into a private studio with easels, canvases, and premium paints that cost more than I earned in 3 months of mowing lawns. By 16, Elaine had moved on to fashion design. New sewing machines appeared along with mannequins and endless bolts of fabric. Mom drove her to weekend courses in Columbus, nearly 2 hours each way. When I asked about joining a robotics camp just 30 minutes from our house, Dad sighed and mentioned budget constraints. "Maybe next year, son. The college fund comes first." I began noticing financial strain in our household. Hushed arguments between my parents about credit card bills became more frequent. To help out, I took a part-time job at the local hardware store, working weekends and summer breaks. I contributed to household expenses and bought my own clothes and school supplies, believing I was protecting that sacred college fund. My high school graduation should have been a milestone celebration. I'd finished second in my class, earning a partial scholarship to Ohio State's engineering program. My parents attended the ceremony, of course, but their congratulations felt perfunctory. "Good job," Henry Dad said, checking his watch. They were eager to leave for Elaine's art exhibition at a local coffee shop where she was showing her latest fashion sketches. "This could be the beginning of her career," Mom whispered excitedly, as they hurried me to the car. My achievements felt like a checkbox they were glad to mark completed. Elaine's potential still warranted their enthusiasm. That night, as they gushed over Elaine's 5 drawings displayed between the espresso machine and the pastry case, I retreated to my bedroom to review my college acceptance package again. I calculated costs against my savings and the promised fund, planning my future with the methodical precision I'd apply to any engineering problem. I believed that fund represented their faith in me, even if they couldn't show it in other ways. Arriving at Ohio State's campus filled me with a sense of possibility I'd rarely experienced. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who spoke my language of mathematics, physics, and design. During orientation week, I met with the financial aid office, confidently mentioning my college fund. "My parents have been saving since I was 12. I explained to the counselor. "I'll need to access those funds to supplement my partial scholarship." The first disappointment came just 2 days later. Mom called, her voice strangely hesitant. "Henry, about the college fund. We can only provide about half of what we'd hoped." She explained that some unexpected expenses had come up, but promised they'd send what they could each semester. I swallowed my disappointment, adjusting my plans accordingly. That afternoon, I applied for student loans and visited the campus employment office. Within a week, I was working 30 hours at 3 different jobs, shelving books at the library, assisting in the engineering lab, and delivering pizzas on weekends. My typical day started at 5 in the morning, with a shift at the library before classes, followed by afternoon lab work, then delivery runs until midnight. I studied between deliveries, keeping textbooks in my car, and reviewing formulas at red lights. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Most nights I managed 4 or 5 hours before my alarm blared, signaling another marathon day. My roommate Jeff, whose parents covered all his expenses, watched my schedule with a mixture of awe and concern. "Dude, you're going to burn out," he warned one night, finding me asleep at my desk, face pressed against my thermodynamics textbook. I just shrugged. No choice. Engineering degree won't pay for itself. The academic challenges were substantial, even without my punishing work schedule. Engineering courses demanded precision, creativity, and endless problem-solving. Group projects suffered because I couldn't attend evening meetings, forcing me to complete my portions independently during the night hours. My grades remained solid but not spectacular, A- and B+, where I might have earned straight, as with more time to study. Social life became an unaffordable luxury. When classmates invited me to football games or study groups at coffee shops, I calculated the cost in hours worked and dollars earned. Almost always I declined. Networking events, crucial for engineering students, seeking internships, conflicted with delivery shifts I couldn't afford to miss. I watched from a distance as my peers built connections that would later translate to job offers. During my first Thanksgiving break, I drove the 3 hours home, eager for a few days of rest. The moment I walked through the door, Elaine's animated voice dominated the house. "It's going to revolutionize the accessory market," she proclaimed, showing our parents sketches of jewelry designs. The dining room table had been transformed into a makeshift workshop with beads, wire, and tools scattered across the surface. "Elaine started a custom jewelry business." Mom explained, her face alight with pride. "She's already sold 3 pieces to her old high school teachers." Dad clapped me on the shoulder. "Henry, come see what your sister's created. She's got real vision." I set down my laundry bag. I'd brought clothes home to save on laundromat costs, and examined Elaine's work. The pieces were nice enough, though similar to items I'd seen in mall kiosks. "Looks good," I offered, genuinely trying to be supportive. "Not just good," Dad corrected. "These are special. She's already talking with a boutique in Columbus about carrying her line." Throughout the break, Elaine's business dominated every conversation. New equipment appeared daily, a specialized jewelry kiln, premium metalworking tools, packaging materials with custom-printed logos. When I asked about the cost, Mom waved dismissively. You have to spend money to make money. This is an investment in Elaine's future. I bit back the obvious question. What about the investment in my future? What about the college fund that had suddenly diminished? When I returned to campus, our communication grew increasingly distant. My calls home went to voicemail. Return calls were brief, with Mom or Dad often saying they were heading out to help Elaine with a craft fair or boutique meeting. Their questions about my studies became perfunctory, their interest seemingly exhausted after asking if I was still doing well. The pattern continued through sophomore and junior years. Each holiday visit revealed new expansions to Elaine's jewelry business. A dedicated room in the house converted to a studio, a professional website, glossy business cards. Meanwhile, each semester brought new notifications about my student loan balances increasing. During winter break of my junior year, a particularly painful family gathering crystallized everything. We hosted extended family for dinner, and conversation revolved entirely around Elaine's creative ventures. My cousin asked about my engineering studies, but Dad interrupted before I could answer. Henry's doing fine with his studies, he said dismissively. But you should see Elaine's new collection. She's incorporating semi-precious stones now. Later, while helping Mom with dishes, I overheard Dad talking to my uncle in the living room. Engineering is just a job, he said, not realizing I could hear. Elaine has real potential. She could build something special, something with her name on it. Henry's just following a conventional path. I nearly dropped the plate I was drying. All those years of hard work, the crushing schedule, the sacrifices reduced to just a conventional path. That night I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, wondering if anything I accomplished would ever measure up in their eyes. By senior year, the constant work and study had taken its toll. Dark circles permanently underlined my eyes. My weight had dropped from skipped meals and stress. But an opportunity arose that momentarily brightened my outlook, a prestigious internship at an innovative engineering firm in Cincinnati. The position aligned perfectly with my interests in sustainable design and offered strong possibilities for post-graduation employment. There was just one problem. The internship paid only a small stipend, insufficient to cover my basic expenses while I continued my coursework. I'd need to reduce my working hours, creating a financial shortfall. With reluctance, I called my parents. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important, I explained, outlining the career benefits of the opportunity. I just need a little help for one semester, maybe from the college fund. The long pause that followed should have prepared me for the answer. We just don't have it right now, Henry, Mom said finally. Elaine's business is at a critical growth stage. Maybe try another student loan. I declined the internship, accepting instead a position at a local manufacturing plant that paid better but offered little in terms of career advancement. The engineering world values those early prestigious connections, and I knew I was sacrificing future opportunities for immediate financial survival. Another compromise in a long line of them. Graduation day arrived with a strange mixture of pride and exhaustion. 4 years of relentless work had earned me a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering. The ceremony was scheduled for 10 in the morning, and I asked my family to arrive by 9 so we could take photos before I needed to line up with my class. At 9:45, I stood alone outside the auditorium, continuously checking my phone. Finally, a text from Mom running late. Elaine needed to prepare for tomorrow's craft fair. Save us seats. I couldn't save seats at a graduation ceremony where students and families sat separately, but I didn't bother explaining this. By the time they arrived, rushing in at 10:20, I was already seated with my classmates. I caught a glimpse of them finding places in the back, just before the engineering graduates were called. The dean read my name, mentioning my cum laude distinction. As I crossed the stage, I scanned the crowd, spotting my parents in the distance. Dad was checking his phone. Mom was helping Elaine organize something in a folder, craft fair applications, I later learned. My moment, 4 years in the making, registered as barely a blip in their attention. After the ceremony, we gathered briefly for photos. We need to head out soon, Dad mentioned, checking his watch. Elaine needs to finish preparing her displays for tomorrow. Actually, I said, summoning determination, I was hoping we could discuss my student loans. Now that I've graduated, I wanted to talk about using the remainder of the college fund to pay down some of the debt. My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret, something between guilt and alarm. Let's discuss this at home, Mom suggested. Not here. In their car on the way back to my apartment, an uncomfortable silence prevailed. I tried again. The interest is already accumulating. If we could apply the college fund now, it would save money in the long run. Dad cleared his throat. Henry, there's something we need to explain. My stomach tightened as we pulled into my apartment complex parking lot. Something in his tone triggered a warning in my mind. We sat in the parked car engine off the spring heat building in the enclosed space. The college fund, I prompted when neither of them spoke. Dad gripped the steering wheel, though we weren't moving. The situation is, well, the fund isn't currently available. What does that mean? Is it locked in some investment that needs to mature? Mom turned in her seat to face me. We had to make some family decisions, Henry. You were managing so well on your own with your jobs and your scholarship. What are you saying? I asked, though a sickening realization was already forming. Dad finally turned to face me. 2 years ago, we had to reallocate those resources. Elaine's business needed capital to expand. It was a family decision based on priorities at the time. The word reallocate hung in the air like poison gas. You spent my college fund on Elaine's jewelry business. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. It wasn't just spending, Mom said defensively. It was investing in the family's future. Elaine's business has such potential. You know how creative she is. My education didn't count as the family's future. The question came out barely above a whisper. You were already on your path, Dad explained, as if this clarified everything. Your degree was happening regardless. Elaine needed that boost to get established. We saw it as having more promising returns. More promising than me. The words weren't spoken aloud, but they might as well have been painted on a billboard. How much, I managed to ask. How much was in that fund before you? Reallocated it. Another uncomfortable exchange of glances. About $47,000, Dad finally admitted. We'd been saving since you were 12. The figure hit me like a physical blow. $47,000. Almost exactly the amount of student loan debt I was now carrying. The debt that would follow me for years, limiting my housing options, delaying any hope of building my own savings, hanging over every financial decision. When were you planning to tell me? I asked, my voice trembling despite my efforts to control it. We thought it might not be necessary, Mom said. You were handling everything so capably. So if I hadn't asked, you would have just let me believe the money was somehow still there. Let me keep thinking you were supporting my education while I worked myself to exhaustion. Dad's face hardened. You're being dramatic, Henry. We supported you in many ways. We're proud of what you've accomplished. Proud. You barely watched me accept my diploma today. That's unfair, Mom protested. We were there. We've always been there. Physically present isn't the same as being there, I countered. You've been Elaine's parents, not mine, for years. The car door opened suddenly from the outside. Elaine stood there looking confused. What's taking so long? I need to get home to finish pricing my new collection. The timing was so absurdly perfect that I laughed, a harsh, broken sound that made all three of them stare. Did you know? I asked her directly. Did you know where all that equipment came from? The website, the marketing materials, the supplies? Elaine's expression shifted from confusion to surprise, then quickly to defensiveness. They said they were investing in my business. There's nothing wrong with parents supporting their children's dreams. They weren't investing new money, I explained coldly. They were using the college fund they promised me. The money that was supposed to keep me from graduating with crushing debt. I didn't know it was your college money specifically, she stammered, looking to our parents for confirmation. But honestly, Henry, art careers are much harder to establish than engineering. You'll make 6 figures right away. I'm building something from scratch. 6 figures, I repeated incredulously. I'm starting at $42,000 with over $47,000 in debt because I had to work instead of taking career-advancing internships. Because every decision I made was constrained by the need to support myself when I thought my money was being saved. You could always work for Elaine someday, Dad suggested, as if offering a solution. Once the business really takes off, keep it all in the family. That was the moment something broke inside me, the last thread of hope that they might recognize the magnitude of their betrayal. I stepped out of the car, retrieving my graduation gown and cap from the trunk. "I need you all to leave," I said quietly. "I can't do this right now." "Henry, don't be like this on your graduation day," Mom pleaded. "My graduation day was already ruined," I replied. "Please go." I walked to my apartment without looking back, hearing their car eventually start and drive away. Inside my small one-bedroom unit, surrounded by engineering textbooks and the second-hand furniture I'd scraped together, I finally let the tears come. That night I didn't sleep in my bed. I sat on my balcony until dawn, watching the stars and wondering how the people who were supposed to love me most could have dismissed my future so completely. The weeks following graduation unfolded in a fog of betrayal and disbelief. I reported to my new engineering position at Midwest Dynamics, a mid-sized manufacturing company that had offered me a starting role in their design department. My colleagues noticed my distraction but chalked it up to new job adjustment. Inside, I was crumbling. After 2 weeks of insomnia and anxiety attacks, I used my new health insurance to find a therapist. Dr. Abrams, a calm woman with gray-streaked hair and penetrating eyes, listened to my story without interruption. "What you're describing is a profound breach of trust," she said when I finished. "Your reaction, the hurt, anger, sense of worthlessness, these are all normal responses to abnormal treatment." During our sessions, I calculated the actual financial impact of my parents' decision. The $47,000, if applied to my loans immediately after graduation, would have saved approximately $21,000 in interest over the standard 10-year repayment period. Beyond the money, the opportunity costs were incalculable. Prestigious internships declined, networking events, missed research projects abandoned due to work conflicts. My phone filled with voicemails and texts from my parents. Their approaches ranged from defensive justifications. "We did what seemed right at the time," to minimizing my feelings. "You're overreacting to guilt trips. After all, we've done for you." Not once did they acknowledge the magnitude of their betrayal or offer any form of restitution. 3 weeks after graduation, I agreed to a tense dinner at a neutral location, a restaurant halfway between my apartment and their house. The conversation quickly deteriorated. "We understand you're upset," Mom began, "but family means moving past disagreements." "This isn't a disagreement," I corrected. "You took something promised to me and gave it to Elaine. That's theft." Dad's face reddened. "We raised you better than to speak to us this way. Everything we've ever done was for this family." "Half this family," I countered. "The half that doesn't include me." "That's not fair," Henry, Mom protested. "We've always supported you." With what words? Because it certainly wasn't with actions or money. The dinner ended with no resolution, just a deeper divide. I drove home feeling no closure, only confirmation that they didn't truly grasp what they had done. Meanwhile, through mutual friends, I heard about Elaine's business continuing to struggle despite the substantial investment. Her new collection hadn't sold well at the craft fair. The boutique in Columbus had declined to carry her line, citing inconsistent quality. She had expanded too quickly, ordering materials in bulk before establishing demand. Yet my parents continued funneling resources to her failing venture. A friend who visited their house mentioned new packaging equipment in Elaine's studio. Another reported seeing Dad dropping off supplies on a weekday when he should have been at work. I made a deliberate decision to establish boundaries. I declined Sunday dinner invitations. I let calls go to voicemail, responding only with brief texts when necessary. I focused instead on building stability in my new life, establishing a budget that accommodated my hefty loan payments, forming connections with colleagues who might help advance my career, finding small moments of joy, despite my financial constraints. The real breaking point came 2 months after graduation. My grandmother called, concerned about my absence from family functions. "Your parents seem stressed about money lately," she mentioned casually. "Your father's been helping me organize my finances, asking about my retirement accounts." A cold suspicion formed. After our call, I contacted my Uncle Robert, Dad's brother, and the family member I trusted most. What he revealed confirmed my worst fears. They took out a second mortgage on the house last year, he told me, reluctantly, and they've borrowed against your grandmother's retirement. It's all going into Elaine's business, but Robert, that business isn't making money. I've tried to tell them, but they won't listen. That evening, I composed a formal email to my parents. The message was clear: I would offer no financial support to them, or to Elaine now, or in the future. Their financial decisions were their own, but they could not expect me to rescue them from the consequences. Within hours, Elaine called furious. "How could you abandon the family like this? I just need a small loan to get through this rough patch. My next collection will change everything." I blocked her number after that call. Then I changed my own number entirely, sharing it only with trusted friends and colleagues. The guilt trips couldn't work if they couldn't reach me. Building a support system outside my family became essential to my healing. Jeff, my former roommate, had also taken a job in Columbus and became a regular presence in my life. My supervisor at work, Marcus, took an interest in my professional development, offering guidance that went beyond engineering problems. Slowly, I built connections with people who valued me for myself, not for what I could provide or sacrifice. I threw myself into my work with a focus that impressed my managers. While my peers spent evenings socializing, I took on additional projects, earning a reputation as dedicated and reliable. I enrolled in evening certification courses, expanding my qualifications despite my exhaustion. The familiar pattern of overwork was unhealthy, but it provided distraction from the pain and a path toward future security. 6 months after graduation, during a performance review, my supervisor noted my exceptional contributions, but expressed concern. "You're doing outstanding work, Henry, but you're going to burn out at this pace. Success isn't just about technical excellence, it's about sustainability." His words echoed my therapist's recent observations. Both were right. I was replacing one form of self-destruction with another. The child who had strived for parental approval had become a man striving for professional validation with the same desperate intensity. The realization prompted a shift in my approach, not working less, but working more intentionally, creating space for recovery and reflection. For the first time in my life, I began to measure my worth by my own standards, not by anyone else's recognition or approval. It was a fragile beginning, easily shaken by moments of doubt, but it was growth nonetheless. 8 months after graduation, news reached me through Sarah, a mutual friend from high school. She had visited a local craft market where Elaine had a booth. "It was kind of sad, Henry," she reported over coffee. "She was practically giving stuff away. Mentioned she's closing her studio space. There were everything must go signs all over." Despite everything, a pang of sympathy surfaced. Elaine's dreams were collapsing, and regardless of the favoritism, she was still my sister. The person who had shared my childhood, who had once made me birthday cards with glitter that got everywhere, who had climbed into my bed during thunderstorms when we were small. Sarah continued providing details I hadn't asked for but couldn't help absorbing. "She's got some debt with suppliers, apparently. I overheard her talking to another vendor about payment plans for materials she'd already used." 2 weeks later, my cousin Michael called. We'd remained in contact despite my estrangement from the immediate family. "Thought you should know," he said awkwardly. Uncle Michael took a second job working nights at the warehouse. Aunt Caroline is substituting during her summer break instead of taking time off like usual. The information settled heavily. My parents' financial situation was deteriorating just as I'd predicted. The consequences of their choices were manifesting exactly as I'd warned. There was no satisfaction in being right, only a hollow ache. My first indirect contact came when my Aunt Linda called ostensibly to check how I was doing in my new job. After a few minutes of small talk, her true purpose emerged. "Your parents are too proud to say anything," she began carefully, "but they're going through a rough patch. Your father's working himself to exhaustion with this second job. Your mother seems depressed." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied neutrally. "They made mistakes, Henry. Parents do that sometimes. Not all mistakes involve taking $47,000 promised to one child and giving it to another." She sighed. They see it differently, but regardless, they're struggling. You're doing well in your career now. Maybe you could help out just until they get back on their feet. I'm paying off the student loans I wouldn't have if they'd kept their promise, I reminded her. That's over $600 every month that could be going toward my own future. The conversation ended uncomfortably with neither of us satisfied. After hanging up, I checked social media for the first time in months. My parents' accounts provided glimpses into their situation. Elaine had posted desperate promotional offers, 50% off, everything support local artists. Mom had shared passive-aggressive quotes about family loyalty and supporting each other through hard times, clearly aimed at me, though I wasn't mentioned by name. Friends had commented with heart emojis and vague expressions of support, not knowing the full story. A mutual friend confirmed what I had suspected. Elaine had moved back into our parents' house, unable to afford her apartment any longer. According to this friend, she had fallen into a depression, spending days in bed and blaming the unfair market and people's failure to appreciate handcrafted items for her business failure. She hadn't sought regular employment, still clinging to the identity of entrepreneur and artist. The information triggered conflicting emotions. Part of me felt vindicated. The golden child was facing reality at last. Another part felt genuine sadness for my sister, trapped in a cycle created partly by our parents' enabling behavior. Most complex was my concern for my parents themselves. Despite everything, I didn't want them suffering or working themselves into health crises. After consulting with Dr. Abrams, I drafted an email offering conditional reconciliation. I would help my parents create a financial recovery plan if they acknowledged their misappropriation of my college fund and agreed to stop financially enabling Elaine's unsuccessful business ventures. The help I offered wasn't cash, it was financial planning assistance, leveraging the budgeting skills I'd developed out of necessity. Their response came 3 days later, disappointingly predictable. They appreciated my concern but felt I was being controlling by attaching conditions to my help. They couldn't possibly abandon Elaine when she was so close to turning things around. The email concluded with hope that I would find it in my heart to help without judgment. The final straw came when Michael, my cousin, sent me a text message with a photo attached. It showed a whiteboard in my parents' kitchen with the heading New Business Plan, Ease Boutique Online. Below it was a budget that included a line item, Startup Capital Car Sale Proceeds. They're talking about selling your mom's car to fund Elaine's online shop, Michael explained. Thought you should know. The cycle was continuing. They had learned nothing from the previous failure. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing repeatedly and expecting different results. My parents were embarking on another round of financial self-destruction, and they wanted to pull me into it. That night, I sat on my apartment balcony watching the summer sunset and contemplating boundaries. Dr. Abrams had emphasized that boundaries weren't about punishing others but about protecting myself. I needed to decide what I could offer without sacrificing my own well-being and financial future. I drafted a new email, clearer and firmer than before. I would not contribute to any business ventures. I would not bail out failed enterprises. I would not enable the pattern that had already caused so much damage. However, I remained open to rebuilding personal relationships if they could respect these boundaries. I never received a direct response to this email. Instead, a week of silence followed, broken only when my phone rang with my mother's new number 1. I hadn't blocked because I hadn't seen it before. The phone vibrated on my coffee table, displaying a number I didn't recognize but with our hometown area code. Something told me who it might be. After 4 rings, I answered cautiously. Hello. Henry, it's Mom. Her voice sounded tired but had that familiar tone, the one she used when she needed something. I hope you're doing well. I'm okay, I replied, keeping my response neutral. How did you get this number? Your grandmother gave it to me. She was concerned about the family rift. A brief pause. We miss you at Sunday dinners. The small talk continued awkwardly for a few minutes, comments about the weather, a question about my job that didn't wait for a complete answer before moving on. I could sense her building towards something, gathering courage for the real purpose of her call. Henry, she finally said, her voice shifting to a more urgent tone. I'm calling because we have a situation. Elaine's landlord is threatening eviction. She needs to pay her back rent by the end of the week, or she'll lose her apartment. I thought she moved back home, I said, confused. She did, but she's still responsible for her apartment lease for another 3 months. She can't break it without paying the full amount. And we've done everything we can. Your father's working double shifts. I've taken extra substituting jobs. We've already borrowed from everyone willing to help. Her voice cracked slightly. We need $4,000 by Friday, or she loses her security deposit too. The directness of it was almost refreshing after months of manipulation and guilt. So you're asking me to send money for Elaine's rent? Just this once, she pleaded. Just to get her through this rough patch until the online store launches. I took a deep breath, centering myself before responding. Mom, what happened to my college fund? The question clearly caught her off guard. What, Henry, this isn't about that. This is an emergency situation. It's directly related, I insisted calmly. What happened to the $47,000 that was supposed to help me graduate without crushing debt? We've been through this, she said, frustration edging into her voice. We made a family decision based on the circumstances at the time. No, you and Dad made a decision. Elaine benefited. I was never consulted despite being the one most affected. I kept my tone even. Now I'm making a decision based on my circumstances. Why isn't Elaine working regular jobs like I did throughout college? She's an artist, Henry. She can't just take any job. She needs time to create. I worked 30 hours a week while completing an engineering degree, I reminded her. It nearly broke me, but I did it because I had to. Why is she different? Don't be ridiculous. That's totally different. How explain how it's different? Mom's voice rose. You're being deliberately difficult. Your sister needs help. And I needed help for 4 years, I countered. Where was this urgency then? I heard movement on her end of the line. Then Dad's voice came on the phone. Henry, this isn't the time for rehashing old grievances. Elaine is facing homelessness. As her brother, you have a responsibility. My responsibility was depleted when you took my college fund, I replied. Did you calculate my student loan interest when you made your family decision? I'll be paying an extra $21,000 because of what you did. Nobody told you to take out those loans. Dad's voice had that familiar defensive edge. You could have gone to community college or taken more time to finish your degree. Nobody told me the money promised for my education had been reallocated either. In the background, I heard Elaine's voice, apparently listening on speakerphone. Just tell him I'll pay him back when my online store takes off. She sounded tearful but entitled. He has a good job, he can afford it. I have a good job that pays $42,000 a year, I stated flatly. After taxes and loan payments, I'm left with barely enough for rent and basic expenses. I drive a 15-year-old car that breaks down monthly. I haven't taken a vacation since college. Where exactly do you think this $4,000 would come from? You must have savings, Mom suggested. My savings account has $900 in it. That's my emergency fund for when my car finally dies completely. The Wilsons next door offered to help, Mom added, switching tactics. People who aren't even family are willing to step up, but our own son refuses. That statement clarified everything about their perspective. They viewed my refusal as a moral failure rather than a boundary. They didn't see their actions as the original breach of trust. In their narrative, I was the villain, not the victim. I have a counterproposal, I said, surprising myself with the clarity that suddenly emerged. I've calculated that the college fund with interest would have saved me $68,000 total. If you're serious about rebuilding our relationship, start with a payment plan to restore what was taken. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Dad spoke, his voice cold. I can't believe you're keeping score like this. This isn't how family works. It's exactly how you taught me family works, I replied. You assigned different values to your children. You invested in one and exploited the other. Now you're seeing the returns on those investments. This is ridiculous, Mom cut in. We're not going to be treated like debtors by our own son. But you're comfortable treating me like your personal bank after breaking your promises. After everything we've done for you, Dad began. I cut him off. What you've done is show me exactly where I stand. I won't be sending money for Elaine's rent, or her business, or any other financial emergency. What I will do is offer Elaine a referral to my company's HR department. We have entry-level positions that pay well with benefits. She'd have to work regular hours like everyone else, but it would solve her financial problems. She's an artist, Mom protested again. She can be an artist on evenings and weekends, just like I was a student while working full-time. I paused, then delivered my final position. Those are my terms. Help finding legitimate employment, not cash handouts. And any future relationship depends on acknowledgement of what happened with my college fund. You've changed, Henry, Dad said quietly. You've become cold. I've become clear, I corrected. There's a difference. The call ended shortly after with no resolution. I sat in my apartment surprisingly calm despite the confrontation. For the first time since discovering the truth about the college fund, I felt completely certain about my position. The guilt that had plagued me, the second-guessing, the worry that I was being too harsh, all of it had dissipated in the face of their continued expectations and lack of accountability. That night I slept better than I had in months, unburdened by the weight of impossible expectations and one-sided obligation. 3 days after the confrontation call, a knock on my apartment door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone, and few people knew my address. Through the peephole I saw Elaine, looking thinner than I remembered, and less polished, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. My first instinct was to pretend I wasn't home, but something made me open the door. We stared at each other for a long moment, siblings who had become strangers. "Can I come in?" she asked, finally. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. She entered cautiously, taking in my modest apartment with a glance that seemed more curious than judgmental. "If you're here about money, the answer hasn't changed," I said, closing the door. She shook her head. "I'm not here for money, at least not directly." She sat on my couch without being invited. "I'm here because I'm angry with you." This wasn't what I expected. "You're angry with me?" "Yes, you've abandoned the family when we need you most. You've become cold and calculating. You're not the brother I grew up with." My temper flared. "Did you come all this way just to attack me? Because I can show you to the door right now." "No, wait," she said quickly, her anger visibly deflating. "That came out wrong. I don't understand why you won't help us." I took a seat across from her. "Did Mom and Dad ever tell you exactly where the money for your business came from?" She looked down at her hands. "They said they were investing in me." "That wasn't their money to invest. It was mine. Money promised for my education since I was 12. They said it was a family decision. A decision made without consulting the family member most affected," I interrupted. "Did you know I worked 30 hours a week throughout college? Did you know I turned down career opportunities because I couldn't afford to take them? Did you know I graduated with nearly $50,000 in debt that will take me at least 10 years to repay?" She was silent for a moment, then whispered, "I knew some of it, not all. When did you find out about the college fund?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Last year, I overheard Dad talking to Mom about whether they should tell you. Mom thought you never needed to know since you were managing fine on your own." The admission hung in the air between us. She had known and said nothing. "I should have said something," she continued, surprising me. "I felt guilty, but by then the money was gone. Spent on equipment that isn't worth half what we paid a website. Nobody visits materials I couldn't use effectively." Her composure cracked, and suddenly she was sobbing. "I've failed at the one thing they believed in, and now we're all paying for it." Despite everything, seeing my little sister break down stirred something protective in me. Not enough to offer money, but enough to hand her a tissue and wait until the tears subsided. "I was jealous of you growing up," she said, eventually wiping her eyes. "You always knew exactly what you wanted. You were so smart, so focused. Mom and Dad expected me to be like you, but when I couldn't, they overcompensated. They threw money and praise at everything I attempted, hoping something would stick. This perspective had never occurred to me. They made it pretty clear they thought you were the one with real potential." She laughed bitterly. "They lied to both of us then. They told me I was special while panicking that I'd never be as capable as you." She looked around my apartment again. Even with everything they did to hold you back, look at you employed independent building a life. Meanwhile, I'm 25 and moving back to my childhood bedroom, with nothing to show for all their investment except debt and unsold inventory. We talked for hours that afternoon, clearing away years of misunderstanding and resentment. Elaine admitted she'd enjoyed being the favorite, but recognized now how hollow that favoritism had been, setting her up for failure by insulating her from real-world consequences and honest feedback. I acknowledged that I'd been so focused on my own hurt that I hadn't considered how the dysfunctional family dynamics had damaged her too, just differently. "What are you going to do now?" I asked as evening approached. She sighed. "I don't know. The landlord agreed to a payment plan, so at least I'm not being evicted immediately. But long-term, I'm out of ideas." "My offer stands," I said. "Not cash, but I can help you find a real job, something stable while you figure things out." To my surprise, she nodded. "I think I'm ready for that. The constant pressure to make the business succeed to justify Mom and Dad's faith in me, it's been crushing. Maybe a regular job with regular hours would actually give me more freedom in a way." The next day, I brought her resume to our HR department. They had an administrative position, open, not glamorous, but steady, with health benefits and growth potential. Elaine interviewed the following week and was hired starting immediately. A month passed before I heard from my parents again. My father called on a Sunday afternoon, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "Elaine says she's working at your company now," he began awkwardly. "In a different department, but yes. She seems better, more focused." He cleared his throat. "She told us everything you two talked about how she felt growing up, about the pressure, about knowing the college fund had been used for her business." I stayed silent, waiting. "I've been thinking about what you said about the interest on your loans." His voice grew quieter. "I don't think your mother and I fully understood the impact of our decision. It wasn't a complete acknowledgement, but it was something. It's affected every aspect of my adult life," I said simply. "I can see that now." A long pause. "I can't repay it all at once. I don't know if we can ever repay it fully, but I'd like to start. Would you be open to meeting to discuss how we might begin to make amends?" 2 weeks later, a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox. Inside was a handwritten letter from my mother, 6 pages of reflection, regret, and request for forgiveness. She wrote about her own insecurities as a parent, about misplaced priorities, about the gradual recognition that their investment strategy had harmed both their children in different ways. The letter wasn't perfect. There were still moments of justification and minimization, but underneath was something I hadn't expected: genuine remorse. Also in the envelope was a check for $2,000, not life-changing but significant, given their financial situation, and a note promising similar payments quarterly, until they had made meaningful progress toward the meaningful progress. Restoration. The healing process was slow and imperfect. 6 months after our first conversation, Elaine had been promoted at work and had moved into her own apartment, a more modest one than before, with rent she could actually afford. She still created jewelry, but as a genuine hobby rather than a desperate bid for identity and parental approval. The pressure removed, she found she actually enjoyed the creative process again. My parents scaled back their lifestyle, finally facing financial reality instead of chasing the next business breakthrough. Dad retired from his second job, focusing on rebuilding his health after months of exhaustion. Mom started teaching full-time again rather than just substituting, providing more stable income. They made small but consistent payments toward my loans as promised. 1 year after the confrontation call, we gathered for dinner at a restaurant neutral territory. The conversation wasn't entirely comfortable, but it was honest. We discussed boundaries, expectations, and the ongoing work of rebuilding trust. My parents slipped occasionally into old patterns, but now caught themselves or accepted gentle correction. Through therapy and reflection, I'd come to understand that my worth wasn't determined by their validation or approval. The child who had desperately sought recognition through achievement had become a man who found satisfaction in his own definition of success. I learned that forgiveness didn't require forgetting that boundaries weren't punishment, and that love could coexist with accountability. My relationship with Elaine transformed most dramatically. The artificial competition manufactured by our parents dissolved, allowing us to discover authentic connection as adults. We weren't best friends, but we were allies in healing from a shared dysfunctional past. The most profound lesson was that true family isn't about unconditional financial support or obligation. It's about mutual respect, honesty, and the courage to hold one another accountable. Love that enables harmful patterns isn't love at all, but fear disguised as generosity. Standing firm on my boundaries wasn't selfish. It was the only way to break the cycle that had damaged all of us. My story isn't about revenge or abandonment. It's about finding the strength to say, I matter too. My dreams matter. My future matters. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is refuse to participate in their self-destruction, even when they label your refusal as betrayal. If you've ever had to make difficult choices to protect yourself from family dysfunction, know that you're not alone. Sometimes standing your ground isn't just for your own healing, it creates space for others to grow too. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength through life's most challenging moments. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth isn't determined by others' inability to see your value.